Hey Los Angeles, we're going in the classroom today and we're going to talk about the spine and the pelvis relationship, mainly dealing with the lumbar area and the pelvic relationship, but also going to address some other things some common mistakes that occur in your training and some of your exercises. Now for some brief anatomy. Different sections of the spine. We have the cervical section, thoracic, lumbar, which are the major players. We've also got the sacral and the coccyx area, which are minor players, but still come into affect some of our movements later. Dealing with basically the pelvis and the lumbar, we have a natural lumbar arch, as you can tell by our lovely assistant here, that if we're standing up straight and we have our pelvis in a neutral level position, we have a natural arch right there. Key to our training, our daily movements, is maintaining that pelvic lumbar arch in its natural position. When we start to do different movements, we get different things occurring on. So if we were to yank the rest of the spine out, yank the femur out, basically what we'd be left with is this pelvic girdle right here. In this model, we do have some of the lumbar vertebrae still showing. So how this comes into play is, and most of us have back issues, especially low back issues. Most of America does. So how this affects us, especially in the disc area, is if we go into anterior tilt, and anything facing forward to our front portion of us is our anterior aspect. If that goes into anterior tilt, now we've got into what's called extension, lumbar extension, and we're compromising those discs a little bit. Okay? Conversely, if we go into posterior tilt, if we go into what's called flexion, okay, the pelvis tilts back, and our lumbar is flattened out a little bit. So we've compromised a little bit going back the other way, especially the disc area. Key to the training, okay, is to keep that the same, bracing front side, glutes, the whole deal. And three common areas that we've got to pay attention to is if we go into a hip flexion movement, we're not talking bending at the waist, we're talking bending at the hips, that we don't lose that natural lumbar arch. And you can kind of play with this, and you can go into a posterior tilt, and you can go into an anterior tilt and kind of see the difference by holding it there. Three common areas we talked about where mistakes occur is bending at the hip. Okay, we go to get sloppy with our back, posterior tilt, we got flexion, especially if we're doing repetitive movements, loaded, then we can increase the risk of some lumbar damage. Okay? The other area is when we do abdominal movements, and we're going to hit the cervical area here a little bit too. If you can picture me lying on my back and having hands behind the head, and I'm pulling my head forward, chin to the chest, now I'm going into cervical flexion here. If I were to take this model and force that head down, okay, we're not doing any good to the cervical area here. Okay, so, and this is a pretty crucial area. So we've got hip flexion, we've got to maintain there. If we're doing the abdominal movements, say I'm laying on my back, I'm going to maintain my chin-chest relationship. The third area where we get into problems is if we're doing overhead movements, and we have some lack of thoracic extension or thoracic mobility or shoulder mobility to where we can't get that hand above the ear, then how we do this is we compensate and go into back bending, trying to press overhead, taking the arm perpendicular by going into big time extension at the back. Okay? If we can't do this, all right, without going into big time lumbar extension, we've got to work on some scapular mobility, and then some thoracic extension. So moral of the story is you've got to maintain this position as much as you can. And in an earlier video, I talked about how every exercise is the plank. So if you're doing an exercise and you're moving an extremity, then you can't compromise your spine position. We can't cheat for that, all right? Because we have too many other things in our daily activities to where once in a while we can get sloppy with the back. But when we're doing high repetitions, especially loaded, we've got to maintain that spinal integrity that we have in a normal upright position.